Topo Athletic is committed to lifelong health and better movement. Topo builds running shoes for those who get out there every day regardless of weather, speed, energy, or mood. Their distinctive fit and feel combines instinctive human movement with modern performance and lightweight comfort to help you keep going, keep trying, and keep moving. Discover the Topo difference and step into a run experience unlike any other.
Hey everybody, welcome to our 60th episode of Fireside Chats. Today we are going to be talking to Aum, who is one of our co-owners. Is more of a internal conversation than but we're going to talk to Aum because he just did something extraordinary, and this is a platform for people that are ordinary people doing the extraordinary thing. And so we're going to talk to him about his extraordinary accomplishments out in Nepal. And just on time, he joined us. Hey, Aum, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you again on the same day because we're always talking business. But also, this has to be the smoothest entry we've had into any fireside chat because it's just the two of us.
Sure, it feels weird to have the interview as opposed to just talking business at this point.
Yeah, because it's like we're like waiting for somebody to enter the chat, but it's like, oh, he's here, you know.
So I was just giving the audience just very brief background on talking to you about the extraordinary accomplishment and how our platform is for the ordinary athlete to talk about their extraordinary accomplishment. And honestly, I don't know that we've talked about this. So the first question I have is like, how the hell did this come about? Like, how did you find out about this event? Like, I mean, look, we scroll social media, but I can guarantee you that running in Nepal and Mount Everest doesn't come up on my feed. So how did you?
So when I was running the Moab 240, there were these two amazing runners from Nepal who were the first two Nepalese runners to finish the race. Yay for representation. And one of them, Govinda, you know, was looking at my feed and he's like, you should do the Everest Marathon next. And I'd heard of this race on like National Geographic and I looked them up and it's like world's highest race, you know. And then of course, sure enough, because you know, everybody who does ultras is just people making dumb decisions over and over again. I go and I see the Everest Extreme Ultra and I'm like, that's a thing. And then I read all about it and it's like they're doing the 70K this year because it's the 70th, like the platinum jubilee of Tenzing Sherpa and Edmund Hillary's first climb of Mount Everest. And then, I don't know, there's just a feeling in my gut. I'm like, just like with anything else, I'm like, well, I'd rather fail big than win small. And just, you know, I just went for it. And I'd wanted to go to Nepal since I was a kid. So it's like, if I can combine that with ultra, you know, why not? I've always been about like just taking things and just figuring it out on the way afterwards. And that's usually how it is for me.
I love it. Like, you know, just, hey, let me just try this out. I think that's a really good lesson for those of you that are listening to the podcast or watching it on our YouTube channel. Like, sometimes you got to say, what the fuck, and just go for it. Like, take the risk, you know. If you live in safety forever, and that's fine, you cannot expect great things. It's when you step outside and you take a risk, no matter what that risk is, no matter how big or small that risk is to you, is when you'll achieve great things and accomplishments. So,
well, it's one of our mantras as a business too, right? Fuck it.
Yeah.
Like, just send it, you know?
Fuck it, let's go for it. So you hit register, and now the reality sets in. Like, one of the things that always makes me laugh is when it gets to race week and they're like, it's getting real. And I'm like, no, it got real the moment you press register. Like, the moment you press register is when it should have gotten real because you got to prepare for it. So you press register. How much time did you have to train before the event? And just give us some idea of what training kind of sort of looked like. Was it any different than the 200 miler to the 240s or the 100 milers that you did? Give us some insight into that.
It was radically different in so many ways, but even the registration process wasn't just like, oh, you register, because they had 60, as I was told, they had 69 applicants and they only selected 19 people.
Oh, wow.
So this is the first time in my life I've been asked to make a running resume. Like, like I've made so many like resumes for applying to jobs and, like Indeed and whatever, and LinkedIn, and Taylor made so many resumes, but this is the first time somebody's asked me to put together a running profile, and it just felt so weird and surreal. And it was like work experience, Moab 240, like Zion 100, Valley of Fire 100, and then they asked me, like, they probe me on like if I've done any high altitude races.
The only thing I keep thinking about is you talk about resume, on resumes we put accomplishments, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, Moab 240 at mile 138 consumed 77 Oreo cookies. Like what does that resume look like?
I guess for me it would be consume Nutella pancake at mile 107 and held it down for a couple miles. But
we should make a make a template for a running resume to have people be able to fill it out and just put like some of that kind of stuff on there. Like my first 100, I think it was my second 100. I couldn't eat any food, gels, that kind of stuff, and so I ended up eating 50 Oreo cookies. So basically, one every 2 miles at each of the aid stations and picking them up because it was the only thing I could consume with the sugar and the carbs and everything else, because everything else I just didn't feel right. It was uncomfortable. So that would be on my resume. Adina just chimed in with special skills. You got that right. You have special.
Heck yeah. It's so funny that we're like coming up with business ideas while we're having this chat too. That's amazing. And Adina, if we're talking special skills, I ate mashed potatoes for like 70 to 80 straight miles of Moab because I couldn't eat anything else. And I put salsa in them. So give that a shot.
So anyway, so you put your running resume together. You said, so was the running resume what got you to be one of the 19, or you were 19, one of 19 already, and now they asked you for additional insight?
So it took them a month to select me after I sent all that stuff. So like 3-4 weeks, I was wondering, like, is this going to happen? Like, am I going to do this? Because there was no response. Like, do they think my resume was like garbage? Like, am I not worthy of the Himalayas? And then I got like the selection from the race organizer. He WhatsApped me and he was like, yeah, you're in. Just make sure that you're ready for this because you need lots of navigational skills. It's very technical. So it's December by this point. And I have, just like anything else, I signed up for it. I have no plan whatsoever on what I'm going to do. Just know that I picked something like things that scared me, like altitude, fear of the cold, like frostbite, fear, like training in high altitude. Those are all things that like scared the bejesus out of me. So I decided, like, what better way to train for something like that than to train in one of the highest cities in the U.S. So I decided to just live in Flagstaff at the onset of like the peak of the winter going into the spring, and it was perfect for me.
Yeah, and you ran in a race? Did you run in a race before going to Nepal? Was there an event that this also helped prepare you for going to Flagstaff?
So I did 4 races in training. The first of which we both did together. We did the Jackpot Ultras, which screw that pavement. You took a picture of my soul leaving my body in that one.
I was saying how much I love Jamil, but I'm never doing that again.
I love Jamil too, man, but I told him straight up, this sucks. While we were putting together one of those tents that blew away, this sucks. And then I did a bunch of races that had like different pieces of what I needed to do, like Antelope Canyon. It poured and rained and it was cold the entire time and had lots of like slick rock and sand and like ladders and all kinds of weird navigational obstacles. And then I did Damn Good Run with you again,
yep.
Which was hot as heck, but it was kind of like my train low race. And then I just capped things off with Whiskey Basin and Leona Divide.
So you basically put it together after you found out in December, based on
pretty
different
much
elements of the event that would help you get to the event then?
Yeah, and I'm honest. And Cheryl's like, pavement sucks. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, ask this guy. He ran 50 miles on that.
Sucked. And Cheryl, by the way, I saw the message earlier about mashers. You're 100% correct, but here's the key to them. Get yourself some maple syrup and some mashed potatoes for your next ultra. It will carry you forever. You got quick hitting carbs and the sugar from maple syrup and the long lasting carbs from the potatoes. Trust me, it carried me all throughout Co-Owner as well as some other events, 100 milers that I've done. Put it on your bucket. Put it on your.
I need to try that. That sounds amazing.
It's phenomenal. Like, it's really phenomenal. Maria at No Limits Endurance Coaching, she was like, dude, that sounds gross. How would you? And I'm like, it's sugar and potatoes. Like, you can't go wrong. And then she tried it at her event, and she was like, oh my God, it's like the holy grail of perfection. Like, you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, you got to try it, Cheryl. It sounds like I'm craving it right now. It's ridiculous.
When I got to Sedona at Co-Owner, I was like, do you guys have any potatoes with maple syrup? Because up until that point, I had been eating oatmeal mush. And they were like, no, we have these hash browns that are dehydrated. We got to put water in it first. And I was like, okay. So they put hot water in it, and they bloom. And then we poured some maple syrup in it. I'm telling you, man, it is golden. So for your next big event, you at Moab or wherever you're going to next, make sure you give it a whirl.
That sounds amazing. But yeah, that was basically my training cycle. Just I've always been of the style of like register for something that scares me and then like just figure out the roadmap afterwards and just go with it. And I'm also somebody who's very largely unmotivated to do long runs solo. So I love doing training races and getting out there and just putting myself in those environments.
So for those of you that are listening or watching this, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So Aum just said he would prefer to do long runs and races because there's company and people around and an atmosphere. And for me, I prefer to do long runs on my own. I prefer to, and I don't listen to music or podcasts. Like, I just want to go run for a very long time on my own without any distraction. So don't think that because you see person X doing it a certain way that you have to do it that way. Do what's right for you. Do what's best for you. And test it out and change it up every now and again. I mean, Aum and I went for a long run in Sedona as well, and that was awesome because we got to chit-chat the entire way and have a good time at it. So it's nice to mix it up too, but do what's
it was awesome and awful because we lost the loop. Like Lori literally said, like if we kept going that way, we would have caught the loop, and we went back up.
We literally turned around at the inflection point that would have kept going. It would have been flat. Instead, we turned around and went straight up that mountain again. So that's what you do. So back to Nepal. So you have logistics and training. Like, you got to figure out where you can train to get to this event that sort of mimics the course. But now you also have logistics on getting there, right? Like, this is not just something really easy to do, hop on a plane and you're there and call it a day. So take us through that process of going through those logistics, because stress is stress. You're going to have the physical stress of training and racing, but now you have the mental stress of getting there and hopefully getting there safely, right?
Yeah. One of the things I will say about international races is there's so much more logistics involved in doing them. Like, I will tell you that I'm usually pretty laid back when it comes to travel and just like go with it. But I will tell you the one thing that I will keep repeating over and over again is like, I don't want to check in any bags if I don't need to. Don't want to check in any bags. But, in this case I had to because I had certain things that I had to check in. But still, I carried 99% of my stuff with me. And the reason for that is because, call it a self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever, but I had a feeling it was going to happen when I did the Jungle Ultra in Peru last year, and sure enough, all my luggage got lost. So I had to go out to Cusco, get myself new gear, had to run with gear that I've never used before, and that was a whole experience.
It's okay to laugh, right? I can laugh about this.
Oh, you can laugh at anything at my expense, because this is all just like what do you call it? Dumb ultra runner stuff.
The reason why I'm laughing is because you're presenting it in this super calm manner. And I can envision myself like getting to the airport and my luggage being lost and the New Yorker in me coming out, F-bombs everywhere, just like, and taking my stress level from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye.
They
So that's why I'm like,
understood the F-bombs, Jason. Everyone spoke Spanish. They wouldn't have understood the F-bombs. So the funny thing is, I was just like, this sucks. I must have repeated 100 times. This sucks, but I'm in Peru. This sucks, but I'm in Peru. This sucks, but I'm in Peru. I'm going to go get Cusco pizza.
I guess you got to give yourself a mantra in that scenario and just hold to it and let life work itself out, because it always does.
Yeah. But that's basically like my mindset going into like the traveling and the logistics as well. But there's definitely a lot to plan, because it's not like you get in your car and you go to the race. Like you have to figure out like where everything's going to go on the plane, and then you get there and it's like you got to rearrange everything for your kit now. And it's just, there's definitely planning for it, but it's nothing a good checklist can't solve. So definitely still a great experience. And if stuff happens to you like it happened to me, then it's just a great story to tell. Dumb decisions, great stories.
Exactly right. It's exactly right. Tell a good story, man, or live a good story, I should say. That's part of my philosophy with racing too. Like people will always say, ease into the race, right? Like you want to be conservative at the front and make sure that you can, finish. And my philosophy has always been, I'm going to go hard. Like I'm here to race. I'm going to go hard.
Okay.
Knowing
gas, no brakes.
What's that?
All gas, no brakes.
All gas, no brakes. There's a very good chance I'm going to fail. There's a very good chance I'm going to fail. But that's okay. Because for me, my story I'd rather tell is I went out as hard as I possibly could. And at mile 48, I blew up at a 50-mile race. As opposed to I ran conservatively, I finished conservatively, and I'm done. Like, to me, that's not as good of a story. But it goes back to, again, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Race your race. Do the thing that you want to do. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. I just think that's so important as a message that we put out for everybody to pay attention to on their own.
Yeah, it's your
Train.
race. It's your journey. Just live your best story.
So you plan the logistics. You obviously made it there and back, because we're having a conversation now, so nothing turbulent, right? So when you get there, like, you're not racing immediately. You have a handful of days, and I'm assuming to get acclimated and to get prepared for the event before the event starts. Like, walk us through that process.
Yes, so we got to Kathmandu, stayed there for a day, and then immediately the day after, the journey starts on a high note with the world's most dangerous airport in Lukla, which it's a very interesting experience, because like you will get there for a flight at 7:30, and your flight cannot take off for 4 hours, 5 hours, or 6 hours. Like our flight took off at 12:30, and there was still a 50-50 chance it wouldn't take off because of the weather window. And they had 2 buffer days for that. Thankfully, we were able to take off on that day for what is the most turbulent flight I've ever been on. Also the shortest flight I think I've ever been on. But yeah.
Do they describe it as that? Welcome to the world's most dangerous airport?
Yeah. And for me, as somebody who worked in aviation, my thing is marketing works. It's really funny, because like the plane is all turbulent and it's like going off, and the pilot co-pilot just turns around to all of us and he's like, thumbs up. And we're like thumbs upping back. Like in my head, I'm like, well, the pilot's not worried. Why should I be worried?
So you get in this plane and you can actually see the pilot and co-pilot. They're not behind a door?
Nope, they're not behind a door. And the flight attendant actually does not let you film in the cockpit. And I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that they have one rusty green first aid box in there. A lot of things seem pretty out of date. And it's like, whatever, the view's outside the window. I'm cool with that.
So how did that make you feel? Like, I don't know that I want to see the pilots, right? Like, fly the plane, do your job, get me to my destination safely. I don't need to, I'm envisioning, like, if it's super turbulent, them panicking and looking at each other, like, what do we do? Like, I don't think I want to see that. So was your reaction like, can we put up a curtain or something?
I think my reaction no, my reaction the whole time was cool pilots, but it was also like, huh, well, you know, it's just an adventure, start to an adventure. Also, one of my other side fleeting thoughts, if we're talking like darker thoughts, was like, man, this would be a sad way to end it. Amazing adventure. But yeah, definitely a lot of thoughts racing through your head when the plane is going up and down. But biggest one to me was like, I see the pilots, they're doing their job. If they're not worried, I don't know why I should be worried.
That's cool. All right, so you're there, so you land, obviously, and you've got how many days before the race starts now?
So we get to Lukla on the 17th of May, and Lukla is at approximately 9,000 feet. So we have a 12-day journey to get to Everest Base Camp. So you already have to like bring yourself into the mindset of like, you can't even think about the race right now. Like right now, the goal, and this is something that a man from the Netherlands named Garrett told me. Garrett's done the race twice. He didn't do it the third time, but he did do the 3 trips to base camp. His thing was like, right now your goal just has to be making it day to day, and your focus has to be getting the base camp. So it was very wild in the sense that like normally you show up to these start lines like tapered and healthy and with the Nutella bagel or however you start your day, you know. And with this, it was like the trek is before that, so you really had to like shift your mindset. So it was like 2 days of typically an average of 2 to 3 days of hiking, and then 1 acclimatization day, which you would think would be a rest day, but it's really more of like stay in the same place and then do a hike to a higher place and then go back and sleep low.
Interesting.
So there was plenty of that. And we all did it as a group. So I built some amazing camaraderie with like a bunch of people from around the world, because I was 1, the only American in the group, and 2, I was a runt of the litter by at least one other person 33, but at least a decade otherwise.
See, that's, to me, I think this is where our platform excels, is because those are the stories of the athletes that we want to tell and share. Is, you know, if you're the youngest person by 10 years, right? So we're talking 40 plus at this point. And your story, we just posted, we'll be posting tomorrow actually on our site, is, help me pronounce his name because I read it, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. Takumi. He was 63, I think you said?
68, and been running for over 3 decades, and he had done a 105K race just days before starting the trek.
Yeah.
That man is on another planet.
Yeah, and it's just amazing, right? And so here you are, a group of 19 people, ranging in ages from 30 to at least 68, hiking for 2 days, then, you know, getting adjusted to the climate and getting acclimated to the climate with a hike, nonetheless, right? Coming back down, sleeping, hiking 2 or 3 days. And so that's, if it took 12 days, what are we talking about? Give or take 7 days total to get from where you landed to base camp then?
Probably 8 or 9 days, I would say. And there was a subtle difference. So there were 18 of us total in the group. Maybe 9. It was 19. We didn't lose anybody. There were 4 of us doing the ultra in that group, and then there were 2 in another group, and there were people who trekked over from like various other like trekking companies. And so at some point when we were at the Sherpa capital, Namche, we split off, the 4 of us with 1 Sherpa, to go on our own way on the remote ultra route. So now there was only like 4 of us on this journey and 1 Sherpa, and we had like a completely different experience from everyone else. Like, it was hilarious. Like, I can get into how hilarious it was, but the gist of it was when we met up, the marathon people were talking about luxury lodges, and our stories were about yaks falling off the mountain and like a cow almost walking into the living room, and like just like basic amenities, and like just remote areas, and like we had a whole different adventure for those 3 days. And when we met back up with them, it was like, you've seen some things, man.
So the whole race in and of itself was 70K, right?
The race itself was 70K.
And
yeah.
So, and what was the longest distance between points that you were traveling? Because you were doing points and then sleeping and then doing another point, right?
So for the trek, the longest distance between points, I believe, was like 13, 14 kilometers, something like that. It was the Sherpa mantra was not too high, not too fast. So when we were climbing very steadily. We were taking our time, taking frequent breaks. I also had to be constantly reminded, like, hey, this is not the race. Like, there's no reason to go fast. The race is on the 29th. You can save your gas from them. Like our Sherpa leader, we call him Raju. He was like, the way he described it was, battery have to keep fully charged until the race.
I love it. So again, so you mentioned it earlier, right? Taper wasn't a thing because if you're hiking, give or take 9 to 10 miles, you know, every 2 days or every day essentially, before you get there, and it's 8 days. So if I'm doing the math correctly, are you covering 80 miles before you even start to 70K then?
Just about, yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that, dude. Yeah, so that's what amounts to what, 130 miles total then between the whole, give or take.
Pretty much, yeah.
Amazing. So you finally get to base camp, and the race is going to start. How do you feel? Do you feel like I'm ready to race? Do you feel like let's continue this hiking concept because I love the camaraderie and the stories and everything that's happening? Like, what's going through your mind?
I think I was just anxious to get started at that point because we'd been thinking the last 4 or 5 days, for the ultra, like we'd been talking to the organizers for the last 4 or 5 days, and every single day they were like, oh, something else changed on the course. Something else changed on the course. Something else changed on the course. Why? Because it's the Himalayas. And, at that point, like, we had stayed 2 nights in this place called Gorakshep, which is, believe it or not, in Nepalese, that's still called Dead Rat. Because the legend is not even the rats survive up there.
Sure.
It's like a saloon town up there on a frozen sand lake, and there's only like 5 houses up there. And so I had 2 sleepless nights in Gorakshep, and then we went to base camp. Felt miserable. Had 2 sleepless nights at base camp. Not saying that I wasn't an honor staying at base camp. It was an honor, but 2 sleepless nights at base camp. And then 2:30 in the morning, wake up for our race call. 3 a.m. breakfast, like same thing we've been having every day, like this oat porridge. But at that point, it's like, hot porridge, Ooh, honey.
Up register for this event as you keep talking about it, right?
And so the race starts at 5 a.m. And so they walk us over to the start line, which is at like the main formation of the Khumbu Glacier, which is the hardest part of the Everest expedition, is to climb over that glacier because it's very dangerous. The entire base camp also sits on top of that glacier. So keep in mind, one of the reasons we're not sleeping is because you hear crackling and avalanches all night. Not to mention a rock almost hit our tent, which that's a whole nother thing.
So yaks, bovines entering the tent, and now avalanches. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, that doesn't even scratch the surface level of the stories.
So before you go on,
yeah.
So 3 a.m. oatmeal porridge, 5 a.m. race start. So you got 2 hours in between this time. As most ultra runners, we're looking for porta-johns before this race event gets started. Like, I can't imagine that they drag the porta-john up to base. So
there's a hole. There's a hole you can use, and it's fantastic. But as you know, like, pooping in the woods is an ultra runner specialty. So pooping on a glacier can be an ultra runner specialty. But yeah, porta-john. The rest of the time was just talking to the other runners. The rest of the time was just trying to stay warm because it was freezing cold. Hands were already starting to freeze. So they walk all 19 of us over to that glacier to the start line. And you can tell which 11 of us are the international runners because we're like covered up and down. And then you can tell which 8 of them are the Nepalese runners because they're wearing their shorts and walking over casually from the shirt. Like you can tell who's the Sherpa clan people, who's ready to get like the sub 9 hour. And so what happens is like the Sherpas will take like your puffy off you when you're ready to go. I decide for some dumb reason that I'm going to take mine off 15 minutes before. Longest 15 minutes of my life.
That's youth for you right there.
Yeah, I'm a Californian boy. I'm not built for that.
If it was me, I'd have had 2 puffies on because I just am always cold. So there's no way. So on the 70K, so on the ultra side of it all, are you going straight through on the 70K? Or are you, again, stopping at a camp and sleeping for the night before starting up again? Like, how does that work?
We're going straight through. So it's there's essentially like a 24-hour hard cutoff that they have. Like, they gave us some baselines for cutoffs for where checkpoints are going to be available and where they're not going to be, like when they're going to be taken down. But the race organizer basically said, doesn't matter which race you're doing, we're going to wait for you in Namche for 24 hours. So starts at 5 a.m. They would wait for us till 5 a.m. the next morning. Thankfully, none of us had to go all the way through the night.
Go ahead.
None of us had to go all the way through the night. So there's checkpoints every 5 to 10 kilometers that have like water. They have like juice. Which in Nepal, all the juice is hot juice, which started to really fascinate me. One of your favorites is their hot pineapple juice.
I love pineapple juice. Just don't dip pizza in it. See, that's a good point right there. You wouldn't dip a slice of pizza in pineapple juice. You wouldn't.
That's not the same. But they also had like muesli bars and just Snickers, which I ate so many Snickers. But yeah, it was basically a continuous ultra, and we just went all the way through. And for me and Takumi, like people in kind of the back of the pack, I mean, we were out there, Takumi and I were out there for 18 hours.
So, I mean, back of the pack, dude, like at some point when you split off from the marathoners, there's only 4 of you. Like, so did you all stay together, or were there Nepalese runners that were hauling ass? Like what was that like now?
The Nepalese runners were all hauling ass. As soon as they left base camp, we never saw them again. They're in another league. There's no comparison. And the rest of us, like, we all stayed together for a while through those early sections where it was very technical and hard to navigate. And did I mention that there were 4 yak caravans between Everest Base Camp and Gorakshep that we had to navigate on, like, loose rock?
So what's caravan?
So it's this distinctive sound that you hear that lives in my nightmares and potentially my dreams now, where you just hear the whistles of the shepherd and you hear like the thumping of the yaks and you just hear their bells. And every time you hear those bells and you see them in the distance, it's like, it went from like, to like, by the 4th one, you're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, please make it stop. But there were so many, let's see, there were thankfully only a total of 6 yak caravans. I will say that when we were doing the trek, we saw over 20 of them, and we got stuck behind one for 45 minutes, and they were farting.
Cheryl has a question. How many yaks are actually in a caravan, in a train?
6 to 7 from what I counted. But I was more focused on the noises the shepherds were making. Like, we started picking favorites, and some of it was like throwing pebbles on the side, some of it was whistling, some of it was going, oi, 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 you know? But it was very entertaining. It was a pastime.
Like, this is an amazing experience, you know, and you're painting a great picture of it because I'm sure the audience can envision it as well.
Envision my frustration?
All of it. Skips, you know, whistles. So the Nepalese runners are gone. And then how many of you that you're calling back of the packers are there?
I would say about 6 of us, and we were all kind of like back and forth, back and forth. It was like me, Takumi, Chao Dang from China, Alex, my friend Alex from the Netherlands. There's a lady from Scotland. She took off at some point, total badass. I think she finished in 16 hours. There was the other American, Patrick from Nevada, super badass too. I think he finished in 13 hours. He took off at some point. And then it was just towards the end, it was just me, Takumi, and Chao kind of just going like back and forth. And because they had like so many sections like change throughout like the days because of like unforeseen circumstances, I'm talking like roadblocks which happened like due to construction, I'm talking like weather, all kinds of things. They gave us Nepalese pacers after the 33-kilometer mark where we split off with the marathon people, and I will say that I could not have finished the race without my pacer Navraj. There was very heavy fog in the night, and we could have easily gotten lost on those mountains. So kudos to him for giving us an extra head and somebody who knew the lay of the land to help out.
So, here in the States, when you race on a trail, you got ribbons, you got flags to help with guidance, and GPS watches that we use. We could download courses too and use that as a navigation tool. What was out there for you out on that course?
So I had my Gaia GPS. There were green flags, but they're very basic. And I will say, much to our disdain, even though the race organizers said they were reflective, this is not a knock on them. I will say they were not reflective. So we couldn't see those green flags at night. And it was also foggy. So we had to rely on having done the course in reverse to kind of figure out where we were at night in totally different conditions. And thankfully, me, Chao, and our pacers just kind of put it together and were able to make it from town to town.
So you just said something, and maybe I misunderstood. You said you're doing the course in reverse. So are you saying the trek from where you landed at the airport up to base camp is the first direction, and then you went from base camp basically to the airport was the event?
Correct. And that was to help us like see the lay of the course and kind of like scope out the conditions, take photos, what we needed to, figure out junctions. The thing is they hadn't marked the course until the day before, so there were no flags at that point. So you're just like looking at the course in reverse. There's no markers, you're not in the race mindset. But I will say that definitely helped a lot. And it also helped having our Sherpa kind of tell us like, well, hey, if you get stuck behind a yak caravan, this is a shortcut you could take. This is a shortcut you could take. And I will say that I did use a couple of those shortcuts. It's a lawless land, Jason.
Say that again?
It's a lawless land, man.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to skin a cat on this trail.
Nobody cares about course cutting in that scenario. Just get around, right?
Yeah. And to answer your question, Adina, yeah, the Pacers were Sherpas, and they do this trek like 6-7 times every season, the spring season and the fall season. So they're like familiar with it. The funny thing is though, they were beat by the end because they're trekkers, they're not runners. So by the end, even they were gassed, and they're like, "Why am I out here?" No, I wouldn't. They had a good time with me, but I'm sure they were also like, "I could be at home with my wife having darbat, but I'm out here with this stranger dude from America for 18 hours."
So is the course, to help me understand a little bit? So is it up and down mountains through trails that have been paved by people trekking this the entire time? Is it sort of free trail where you're just making your way through? Then is it dirt, rocks, ice, snow? Like what did you encounter?
All of the above, dirt, rock, ice, and snow. Lots of single track, some of the most beautiful single track I've ever seen. I mean, you're looking at like snow-capped Himalayan peaks everywhere. And also a cliffside that goes down 1,000 feet. Yeah, just, and there was also, I think most of these big differences, like as far as like not single track and like wide open expanses, was from the ultra course. There were a lot of like rocks. I think probably similar to, I wouldn't say people would be familiar with the dells here. You've done Cocodona.
Yeah.
Very similar to the dells. Lots of rocks, but there was also lots of streams. Just very very terrain. And I would say, to describe it, like 90% of the course was not runnable.
Oh.
There was like a good 10% that was actually like, I can do a 100-meter jog. Oh my God, I'm out of breath.
So that's more elevation than the actual terrain then?
Yeah, absolutely. Because even the climbs that we had to do, like 80-90% of the race kept us above 14,000 feet. So imagine being on 14er nonstop and doing this race. I mean, you sort of have a similar experience like that with pacing at the Ure, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and pacing at Ure, I mean, that event is just hard for hard's sake, and
This was
you were up,
hard sake too.
just up high constantly and climbing really rugged terrain. And so there you have the rocks that are the slick rocks that just slide down from underneath your feet as you're trying to cross over different paths on that course. So that's just tough. So
there was very similar things to that in this course as well. I will say that there were some really good single track climbs, but there was also like a lot of unevenness. It was just, man, you're gasping for air every 10-15 seconds. I mean, those climbs are brutal.
For those of you who have questions, please start popping them in there. We're going to get this wrapped up here fairly quickly. But so you go through this process, it's 80 to 90% unrunnable. You barely breathe half the time. Tell me what it's like when you finally can sort of see the finish line, or you're coming up on the finish line, and then when you actually see it, like, what is that experience like?
Me and Takumi were done by the end. Even he was making like exclamation noises, like just like oh. And I started making noises too, because my knees were killing me at that point. My right knee was killing me, because we're talking 8,000 feet of gain in this course, but also 14,000 feet of down in this course.
Brutal.
So much down. And like my knee was like, please have mercy. Like it was done. And so we're like power hiking, and then we see the lights of Namche, and we're like, oh my God, there it is. Like, where's the stupa? Where's the stupa? The stupa is like a formation, prayer formation in Buddhist culture, and it's like this big rock with like scripture written all over it. And we knew that it was supposed to be there when you're supposed to turn, and we're like, where's the stupa? Where's the stupa? And then we see it, and you go through town. Namche is like a town that has like a bunch of staircases going different places. So me and Takumi are disoriented and stumbling, and our pacer's like, no, this alley, no, that alley, this alley. And then we like it was very weird, because we just like turned the corner, turned left, and people, the Sherpa locals are looking at us like we're the crazy ones. And also people are up and about. We thought it was for us at first, but we realized that May 29th is Everest Day, so they had nightclubs and everything popping, which there's a big nightclub scene, as I found out, in Namche Bazaar. And so we turn the corner, take a left, and then you see like the finish line just there, and we're like, it was very much like, oh, there it is. And so Takumi turns to me, and this will be my core memory from this race, and he's like, finish together. And so I grab him by the shoulder, and he grabs me by the shoulder, and as we're coming into the finish line, I'm pretty sure his toe beat me by an inch, but I'm pretty sure like the organizer knew the intent. We both put our foot out at the same time, and everyone was just cheering, and it was just a really cool moment. And then we're sitting there with our certificates, and the race organizer's like, I'm so happy with this group. I'm thinking about making 100K. And in my head, I'm like, get me my food. Get me my bed. I have people to talk to.
I just want to eat. So for those of you who have been with us this entire time, thank you. But go to runtrimag.com tomorrow, because Aum tells the story of being with Takame and what that really means, and you'll get additional insight into the experience that Aum had out there doing this 70K, which is just Dude, you've painted just this phenomenal picture of endurance sports from a different perspective, where in the U.S. we're accustomed to, for all intents and purposes, at an Ironman, seeing the red carpet and seeing the banners and everything that goes with it at 100 mile ultras that are a bit bigger than some of the smaller ones that we've seen. You have a lot of fanfare and a lot of different components to them. What you've painted is a picture that I think people should embrace, which is, this was an event that had 19 people in it. 4 of you did the ultra component of it while the others did the marathon component of it. You crossed the finish line after 18 hours, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, with a 68-year-old Japanese ultra runner, who I'm sure there were language barriers, right? But you
had a beer. There was language barriers. By the way, the first thing he did afterwards was have a beer.
Yeah. So I just want people who are listening to this or watching it on our YouTube channel to realize that there is no one perfect way that an endurance sport event takes place, or what gets constituted as an endurance sports event. So Aum went to Nepal and he raced 70K. If for you it's going down the street and running the local church 5K, so be it. Embrace it, enjoy it, love it, talk about it, share it with your friends and family, because you've accomplished something that is extraordinary. And I hope that message comes across. And you've done a great job in being able to paint a picture of what endurance sports events can look like from a completely different perspective. And I hope people are willing to take the risk that you took and go outside of their comfort zone to go and enjoy something else.
And can I just add to that too, and say that you and I both have very similar stories of how we started. And there was a point where for both of us, the 5K was our Everest, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I remember having nerves before my 5K race. There were only 10 people in that race. It was a local race in Long Beach, you know? And so it's all relative. Like, the way I feel proud about this event, like, if you are just starting to run and you do something like a 5K, having like not run before or something like that, or you're just making a comeback or whatever it is you're doing, whatever your journey is, like, celebrate it, you know, like, throw it on the fridge, you know, like, have a party with your family and friends, you know, like, it's just, everyone's journey is amazing.
So before we get off, I'm going to ask you to give us one thing that you feel has changed in you from this event.
Just my gratitude for this little things, and I think we get that from every single ultra. Yeah, Adina's right, celebrate everything. But you know, I took pictures of like the tomato soup that we had. I took pictures of like the rice and, you know, the darbat that we had. I took pictures of like where I was standing, and somebody else might look at the same picture and go, it's just tomato soup out of a bowl. And for me, like, that tomato soup was the best thing in the world. And what that taught me is that everything is all just your perspective. Like, you know, how many things do we have here in like our Western society that we just take for granted? Water from a tap, you know, electricity, a simple like 3 square warm meals, you know, like, you're allowed to have gratitude for those things. It's cool to have gratitude for those things, and just realize that those things aren't like given, they're privileges, you know, and just enjoy them. And I promise you, the more gratitude you have for things around you, the happier you'll be.
Well said. Appreciate your time again, man. I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow, and we're going to talk nothing but business tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we can come up with business ideas on this chat too.
Yeah, we did.
You wrote that down, by the way, right?
That?
You wrote that down, by the way, right? The running resume, because that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we got to do that, the running resume. All right, man. Appreciate you. Thanks.
Talk to you tomorrow, man.
Bye.
Thanks, Jason.